All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott from Jeff Teaches Programming with what I believe, at least, will be the last lecture that we'll have converting this payroll application to a total EF core. This will be the last one. I think it's working now, and this will be it as far as what we're working on. And ideally then, this is what we will end up converting into our ASP.NET application. So let me get in here. And start taking a look. First thing I want to show you is this. I want to go through the models. I was having problems with these models, so as you saw, I took a bunch of stuff that was in here and was making copies. And one of the things I found out was I had to go back in, and in my employee, I had to add all these and make them what's called virtual. First of all, let's talk about what that even means. Any employee could have any of these. An hourly employee has the first two. A piece worker employee has the second two. A commission employee has the third two. And the last one is for a salaried employee. But I didn't have these in there before. And I did have, for example, for an hourly employee, I had this stuff. And I didn't have this special word in there with those. Now, so who cares? Why does that matter? It matters because we only have one table. And I was getting zeros into the database for hours worked, hourly rate, pieces made, price per piece, etc. because the employee table didn't know about these particular fields. So by putting them in and making them virtual, as you can see, what that allowed to have happen was to come in here and then take them in here and use the override. We were already doing an override on calculate gross pay, but now we're overriding hours worked and hourly rate. Why does that matter? Because what that says is, oh, this employee is an hourly employee, and so use this hours worked and use this hourly rate. In the same way, for a piece worker employee, use this pieces made and use this price per piece. Because again, what kind of an employee is it? It's a piece worker employee. All right, for a commission employee, so an employee of type commission, we will override the sales amount and we will override the commission percentage. And finally, for the salaried employee, employee of type salaried employee, we will override the salary. Well, putting that in then, what that allowed me to do was to go in and start actually getting values into the database. Now, I put some garbage stuff in here, but I just want to show you what is in here right now. Where is that? Let's see. Let me take this and refresh it. All right, we'll go back down to our databases here. And there is payroll database ASP03b. So if we look at tables, you'll notice there's only one, employees. And if we view the data, again, I put some garbage employees in here. All right, but I just want you to see. Now notice, oh, that doesn't look good, does it? They all have zeros. Well, we're going to go check on that in just a moment. All right. In fact, I think I may know what the problem with that is. What I'm going to do is this, just to be sure. Okay. And if it's something else, well, then I was wrong with what I told you. But I'm going to go to my migrations folder and I'm going to delete it. Okay. Then I'm going to go to the database here and I'm going to delete that and delete any connections that might be open as well. So this will now be gone. It is gone. So if I go back and refresh my database, you'll notice that payroll database ASP03b is gone. Well, if I go back then to my manager console and do the migrations again. So add migration, initial create. Again, right now you'll notice that over here, we've talked about this before already, there is no migrations folder in here. But as soon as I hit enter here, there'll be one. It says started, succeeded, and when I get my prompt back, okay, there's migrations. And this is what was created here. It's created a table, and as you'll notice here, if you take a look, that table has an ID, a first name, a last name, and hours worked, etc. It has all this stuff. And a key thing it has on the end is it has an employee type. And the primary key is the ID. This drop table means if we drop it, just, get rid of it. The down means. All right. The up means we created. We did the add migration. All right. So we've done that, but it's still not here. So if we refresh, you're not going to see it here. There is no payroll database ASP03b, not until we come in and do an update database. And it tells us that succeeded. Now when we go in here and we right mouse click and we refresh, it should be here. There it is, 03b. And when you look at this and we look at the table, and first let's look at the designer. All right. And it doesn't matter. We can look at the top or the bottom part. But the key thing here, this did not come out correctly. I'll tell you that much. These should all be nulls. Because not null means they all have to be filled in. So I did something wrong there. All right. And I think what I did wrong, let's see if we can just change it here. How about that? So first name can't be null, last name can't be null, but hours worked can be null. I think these are going to have to be null. We're going to find out in just a minute. Oops. But I'm going to change all these, and then I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to come in here, at least try to save this. So when I try to close it, it'll say, do you want to save it? And I am going to say save. All right. Well, that's the query. So the employee type can't be null either. So I'm going to put a not in front of that. Okay. Do I want to save changes to the following items? I'll just say save. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's cancel this. And let's tell it to update. Hopefully that'll come up with an update database on here in a second. It did. All right. Now, I'm not sure if it took all that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Package Manager console. I'm going to go back to another add migration. And I'm going to this is just the title, so I'm going to call this Made Employee Type Specific Fields Null. And we'll tell it to update the database again. All right. So let's go back to databases and let's refresh. And now let's take a look at that table again. We'll look at it in designer mode. what you'll notice is these now all have check marks by them. So the first name and last name can't be null, but all the other ones that are specific to employees can be. And I believe, at least, that's what we want. All right, so that's everything under models. Service, let's take a look at the services. We don't have to look at app.config. That hasn't changed any. All right, but in here, again, we've got our name. Probably should have given this a different name by now, but it's okay. All right. Listing hasn't changed. What did change, I've changed it a few times in here, has been this update. All right, we create a new payroll DB context. It says attach entity if already not tracked. All right, and we're basically going to be tracking this stuff. The key things in here are to be able to set the state and to save the changes. Just like in delete, we remove and we save the changes. In add, we add and we save the changes. All right, so let's get rid of that. And let's go to data, and we just looked at the context. Let's look at the context factory. No, I guess it is the context, sorry. The factory, I believe, has not changed at all. Okay. So let's look at the context. One thing I did change in here, or two things, I guess. First, it expected some options. It wanted us to come in here and show that we're reusing local DB and the name of our database, etc. All right. Next, this had to be in there. We had it in there for a while, took it out, had it, etc. But this says that our one table has a discriminator that's employee type, and that employee type must be one of these four things, which are the same things, same exact names as our drop-downs. This, we're letting the system create the gross pay for us. We're not calling anything. It's going to automatically create the gross pay for us. So we're telling it to ignore gross pay. All right? And I'm not even putting it into the actual final database itself. I had problems. I could have probably put it in there, but it would have involved more work, and I just decided to leave it out. Finally, when we go back in here and we go under forms and we go to the employee manager, again, a lot of rewrite off and on, back and forth with this stuff. There's our constants, no biggie there. I tried to put comments in here so you at least knew what we were working with. The employee type, the service that we're creating, which has all of our CRUD operations basically in it. The binding source, which is the bridge, as it says, between our data grid view and the data itself. It lets them communicate with one another. The selected employee, which we're saying could technically be null. And this Boolean flag, as it says, we want to make sure that once we repopulate a text box that we don't keep doing it. We don't get ourselves into some kind of a recursive, for lack of better words, recursive type of loop doing that. All right. Now, we've talked about this stuff before, but I'm going to mention it again. All right. And that is selecting a row at a time. So no multi-select. We make it read only when we start. The employee type is set to nothing unless we pass something in. Okay, so this says, oh, that employee type, set type equal to that employee type that we passed in. All right, now we could have put this over multiple lines, just so you know. This is a shortcut for writing it like this. And either one of those will work. All right. Now we've got our load event, which again has gone through some overhaul, so to speak. We are saying that our binding source, what we're using to communicate our data with, is the data grid view. That's our data source. All right. And we're basically saying here that when it changes, to update it accordingly. So if we change what we're working on, if we go from one row to another, the text box should update. This set labels by type, let's look at that and then we'll come back here. this makes sure that the three different labels that we have in here, the two different ones that are in here, not three, two. Come on, designer, load up. These two are set to hours worked and hourly rate, if they're an hourly employee, etc. All right, and that's what this is doing in here. All right, then after we do that, we call our load employees. As it says, that loads the employees from the database. So let's look at that one. All right, so we're saying if there's nothing in there, you know, if the employee type, if somehow we call that and didn't pass in anything, it says you must include an employee type. I'm trying to be more consistent here with the way I'm lining this stuff up. All right, otherwise, okay, we wrap them in what's called a binding list. Now, there's a lot of stuff happening in here, but basically what we're saying is, hey, hourly is going to hold all our hourly employees, pieceworker, our pieceworker employees, commission, our commission employees, and salaried, our salaried employees. This should never be called without one of those, but if it is, just create a new list of type employee. All right, then assign the binding source, this employee list that we're creating right here, to our binding source. All right, and then as it says, we call this setup data grid view. That rebuilds our columns. We'll look at that in a second. Then we refresh the data grid view after we've done that. And this move this thing to the end, I wanted the gross pay to go on the end. And I don't even know if I need it there anymore or not, because I moved so much stuff around. But it was appearing right near the beginning. We had the ID, the first name, and the last name. Then we had the gross pay, and I didn't want it there. I wanted it at the end. All right, then select the first row. Let's take a look at this setup data grid view. And what is that doing? Well, again, I played with this. I'm going to do this because I think it makes it easier to read. You may or may not agree with me on this. So this says our first column is going to be the ID. That's its name and that's its data property name, but we want to call it ID with a capital I, not that you have in a capital D. Not that we have to do that. We could have called it identifier. We could have called it anything we want to. But where it says header text, that literally means that. That is the text that it's going to have. All right. Then we've got our first name, followed by our last name. And again, we're just prettying this up a little bit, putting some spaces in our names. Then we've got hourly. And in hourly, we're adding what? The hours worked and the hourly rate. Should have done this beforehand. I apologize. And that's it. So then we break. If it's a piece worker, we want to be able to add the pieces made and the price per piece. And again, after that, we want to break. Then we've got a commission worker who has a commission percentage followed by a sales amount. And again, we're going to break. And finally, we have our salaried worker who has only the salary. So these are the employee type specific fields that we're putting in here. All right. Again, we made sure at the end we added the gross pay and that we're formatting it for currency. All right. Then coming back up, because I'm trying to run through this the way we did it after the setup data grid view. All right. We, again, as I said, reset the bindings to refresh this, move that to the end, and select the first row. Coming back then. All right. So we did this, then we did this. Okay, we call load employees. Now, if our binding source changes, we want to repopulate the text box. What does that mean? That means that if we go from one record to another, all right, we want to change the first name and the last name. Then if it's an hourly employee, we want to change what's in the hours worked and the hourly rate. If it's a piece worker employee, we want to change what's in the pieces made and the price per piece. If it's a commission employee, we want to change the commission percentage and the sales amount. And if it's a salaried employee, we want to change the salary. And again, we probably don't need this anymore. I probably should get that out of there, but I'm just going to leave it. This appears to be working. Again, this sets our labels. We talked about that already. This is the load employees. We talked about that already. All right. This set up our data grid view. We talked about that. As it says, this is going to update the text boxes when a row is selected. So it'll make sure that the first name and last name are filled in. And then again, based on the type of employee, that the individual employee information is filled in. All right. When we want to clear any employee fields, all right, we are populating it. So we're setting that to true. We're clearing out the 5 text boxes. I played around with this binding source thing, put it in there, and it cleared up some errors, but introduced other ones. And then we're calling clear selection. All right. And then after we've done this, we're setting this back over to false. Then we've got our add record here. And I'm looking, this is not good. Hold on a sec here. Yeah. So this is calling add record, and that's calling update record, and there's delete record. Well, somehow that I wanted it got moved down further, and I'm not sure why, but that's okay. That's fine. So add record is going to validate the first name. All right. And I just started playing around in here. Just call them errors because I did a lot of copy and paste. So no first name error, no last name error. All right, some of these I didn't have to change. So we can change these back. So we can say no first name error. And again, we can move that down. No last name error. And we can move that down as well. All right. So those are just validating. Okay, hours worked must be within there. Hourly rate must be there. We could have used the, could have come in here and used the $sign and then use the actual field names, you know, min rate, max rate, like we're using them here. I could have used them in the message. I didn't, but we could have. Piece worker. Pieces made must be within range. Price per piece must be within range. And with all these, if everything works, you're either going to create a new piece worker or a new hourly worker or a new commission worker or a new salary worker. All of them will have their first name and last name plus that field or field specific to that type. If this should never get hit, but if it does, we just are going to say invalid employee type. All right, then we're trying to add them to the database. This says, as it says here, add these to the binding list so that the data grid view will automatically update. Then if the list isn't null, all right, we want to add it. Refresh the data grid view. So a lot of this, you know, we're going in here. It says select the newly added employee, so grab the one that we had. And it's count because it starts at 0, so -1. All right, and it was the one we just added. So then just say that it worked. Otherwise, as it says here, and again, we don't have to do this, but we can. We can just say unexpected error. And I actually did get that while I was testing a few times. So here's our update. It's going to be much the same. So again, no first name error. No last name error. I think I like to be consistent with my error messages. I do have them just like that. But other than that, it's pretty much the same stuff that we did before. All right. Hours worked in here, hourly rate, piece worker error, checks, commission worker checks, salary checks. Okay. We update the database. We refresh the data grid view so that it's going to show the change. We call the selection changed event a fire. All right. And we let them know that it was updated. I have to do this. So we can put here update success. And I think for the ad that we had way up here, so we can call this ad success. Okay. All right. Finally, this just says that when we do the add record that you saw up above, we call add record. When we do the update, we call the update record. Delete. All right. This was probably should have written a routine to do this. It would have been cleaner to do that. All right. So in other words, I really should have done this. So if it was null, we can return. All right. Otherwise, attempt record delete. It's going to give me an error because, of course, that doesn't exist. So we will grab this. And then down below this, we will put in private void attempt record delete, and we'll paste that back in. Okay. All right. And again, that just asks us if we want to do the delete, and if we do, it does the delete, clears the fields, etc. This allows us to go from one form to the other, and here's our exit. All right, so that is everything. So let me run it and see if it does work. Okay, I'm hoping it does now. If it doesn't, I'm had enough of this. I'm ready to go on to our ASP.NET adventure. All right, so there's hourly. There's nothing in there because we just, for lack of better words, just fixed it, whatever you want to call it. So there's everything that's in there. So let's try to add somebody. We'll add John Smith, who worked 40 hours, who makes $25 an hour. So if this works, this should be John Smith, 40, 25, and 1,000. Right? It still isn't clearing this, and I thought that it would, but it's not because we have the current record highlighted. So let's say John's got a wife, Betty. All right, and she worked 50 hours, and she makes $20 an hour. This should be 1,100. That's the only reason I'm using those numbers. So we add that. All right, so there they both are. Let's go back to John here. And you'll notice that when I go from John to Betty, how it changes. And let's say that John is really Jonathan. All right, so let's update. And he is now Jonathan. All right, let's add another employee. So we'll call this employee delete. And it doesn't matter what numbers. We can keep the same numbers in here. Let's just say that they worked 9 hours and they make $9 an hour. All right, so they made $81. And we don't want them in here anymore. So we will just click delete record. Do you want to delete employee delete? Yes. All right, so they're gone now. And let's take a look before we go on. Let's refresh this. And let's go back to our database. And let's view the data. And there's Jonathan Smith. Oh, crud. And it is not putting those in there. Boy, I ran this before and it worked fine. Son of a gun. Well, I'll have to look at it, I'll tell you that much. But let me just do this. Because I don't know what the problem is. but there is one. All right, let's go to our next type here. So let's run it. I'll fix it before I go on. All right, so let's go on and we'll go to Pieceworker. And we'll have here Mabel Jones, who made 100 pieces and gets 33 cents a piece. So that should give her $33, and it all does. And her husband is John Jones. He made 50 pieces, and he gets 25 cents a piece. All right, John decided to quit. In fact, let's do this. We'll go up to, let's make him Jonathan as well. How about, so his name is really Robert. How about that? And he didn't make 50 pieces. He made 40 pieces. So we'll update his record. So it's now Robert at 40. Okay, so that worked. And he's going to leave the company. Do we want to delete Robert Jones? Yes. All right. Again, we'll go back. We will refresh. Here, I got a feeling it still isn't going to have the right numbers in there, but at least I want to see if it put Robert Jones in. It did. Why those are all zeros, I don't know, but they are. So we'll have to work on that. It does have the right employee type for each one of these. That's good. All right. Let's go back again here, and we're still running it. So let's go back, and let's try a salaried employee. All right, and this can be Betty Green, and she has a salary of 56789.00, $56,789. Add her. There she is. That's all of her information. She just got a raise, $10,000 raise, so 66,789. We'll update her, and it changed to 66. Let's add her husband, who's Boris Green. He doesn't do as well as Betty. He makes 44,444.44. So we'll add him. There he is. He decided he wanted to quit, so do we want to delete Boris Green? Yes. Finally, let's go back and just do one more. Let's do commission. And for that commission worker, we'll have here Ken Carls, and his rate will be 10%, and he made $50,000. 10% of that should be 5,000. And as you can see, it is. And we'll put in here Jill Brown. She makes 19%, and she had 75,000. So she made 14,250. And finally, let's just add one more. We'll call this garbage employee. Add that, and then let's remove them right away. Yes. All right. Oh, I'm going to exit. Yes, I want to exit. I'm going to come back to our database, and I'm going to refresh it. And I'm going to look at the data, which I know is wrong already, but you can see they're all in there. All the employee types are set correctly, but we've got to go back and fix this. All right. Now I'm at 34 minutes, which is way too long for a lecture anyway, so I'm going to stop here, and we'll see what happens when we come back.